This video is brought to you by Sporlan, quality, integrity, and tradition.
We were called today on an office AC not working. So this is their office AC. It's running when we got up here. The air coming out is not very warm. And let's go ahead and open this guy up and have a look in here. And I can see it. It is iced up. Look at that. Oh yeah. Solid, top to bottom. So that's a problem. Filters are pretty plugged up too. Holy majoli. It's a lot of ice. All right, well, we're gonna get this defrosted and try to figure out what's going on. All right, we got this guy opened up and the belt is still there, whether or not the motor's running. We're waiting. Motor's running. Okay, so we know that that's good. The indoor blower wheel though, holy moly, is that thing dirty. It is bad. Caked up. And then on top of that, these air filters aren't helping the situation because they're barely letting any air through. So that's a problem. All right, we got to get this defrosted first. So the first thing we're going to do to get this defrosted is simply disconnect power to the compressor. There's our compressor contactor. So we disconnected power. We're going to turn it on, put this panel on, and we're going to let it run without the filter door on, just pulling in the outside air. So let's throw the panel on, and then we'll leave the filters off. That way it can draw hot air through here and it'll melt that. And at the same time, they said their entire kitchen was a little bit warm. So we're gonna check out their main kitchen AC too, which is a newer carrier. So we'll check this out and see if this guy's working while we're waiting for that. And then we'll end up having to get filters too, probably. And we might even pull that blower assembly, but we gotta figure out why it was frozen up for sure. So open up the kitchen AC, indoor blower's running. Look at these filters though, man. No wonder they're saying it's warm in the kitchen. These are 100% plugged. So we'll definitely be getting them some new filters. That's pretty bad. I'm surprised it's not iced up. It's been about 40 minutes. I took a lunch. Evaporator's nice and clear. It's actually not that dirty either. For the most part, it looks like most of the water went down the drain, which is good. So we're gonna go ahead and power this guy down. We're gonna go ahead and clean it because it's filthy. This condenser in here, it's just filthy. So we'll go ahead and do a proper cleaning on it, and then we'll evaluate, see if we can figure out why it potentially iced up. I went ahead and popped the top on it. It's not that big of a deal. One person can do it. You can see how dirty this blower wheel is. And look at this inside condenser that nobody gets to. And then on top of that, it's a double road condenser. So it's gonna be dirty inside. Still a little remnants of ice on the compressor. So we're gonna get this cleaned up. Once we get it cleaned up, we'll get it kind of degreased a little bit because it's kind of greasy in here. Then we'll be able to evaluate the unit, but it's so dirty that we can't really do anything else. So we're gonna knock this out. Look at the heat exchanger. We permanently have the heat turned off. Turned off the gas valve, disconnected at the limit switches. But look at that, just caked in there, man. And this nonsense, what, I don't know what is going on there. Someone's trying to make a solution to the wires rubbing out. This economizer is disconnected, so while I'm in here, I'm gonna go ahead and rip all this wiring out, so that way we don't got this big old mess of crap over here. So I'll pull the blower assembly out. We're gonna be lucky if this thing doesn't vibrate to all hell after I clean it. Sometimes these things get so, caked up that when you clean them, they've been self-balanced with all the grease. Normally, I'd say, you want to be careful about the bearings and stuff, and while I'll still be a little bit careful, there's only so much you can do with this much neglect. So I've got the Refrigeration Technologies COIL spraying gun right here, the foam sprayer, and I've got the blue Venom pack in here. Just kind of spray it on, let it sit, and then we'll kind of spin it around. It's sitting in water. Let it sit, and then we'll give it a rinse, and then we'll start rinsing the unit too. far as the AC goes, we're gonna rinse the big stuff, the big chunks off first, and then we'll get some coil cleaner on there. The rinse like this is gonna get majority of it off. I'll also get that ice off too. So we'll get majority of the big stuff off this way, and then you know, get the coil cleaner on there and really get in there and clean that coil. This guy's still soaking over there, letting that degreaser really penetrate. We are using the brightener cleaner, so it should break down a lot of that grease. But look at those big old chunks coming off that thing, man. Look at all this, man. This is going to be the satisfying one because this stuff is just caked on here. That's nuts how thick that stuff is. So rinse all that out. Also got to be careful because sometimes they'll drill holes down through the unit. See that one? They put the electrical down through there. So it's not going to be 100% watertight. But again, we got to clean it, so we're going to have to deal with whatever happens here. Try to get it rinsed as best as possible. I just dumped it. Look at all that stuff just running out of this blower assembly right here. Everything coming out. I mean, it's not even, I'm going to have to do a couple more rinses, and it's pretty nasty, the chunks coming out of it. Pretty crazy what neglect will do, you know? Went ahead and put some cleaner on the evaporator, and we're just carefully rinsing it, not overflowing the drain pan, and it's coming out pretty dirty too. It's pretty nasty. So we'll give it a good rinse. We still haven't even gotten any cleaner on that. We're just slowly rinsing this guy. It's getting a lot better, and doing the evap first. This guy isn't coming clean. So down in here, this is like caked on grease, and I'm having to scrape like every single vein, and it's just caked in there. So I called the supply house, and they have a pre-built assembly. So my tech's going to pick that up right now. So I'm going to keep cleaning the unit, and he should be back with the blower assembly. Then we'll put it all back together and hope there's nothing else wrong. It's insane what's coming out of this coil right now. It's just pure black gunk. So we'll give it a good solid rinse inside and out. And we'll rinse the whole inside out, and we'll get started on redoing the economizer wiring. So I got all the economizer wiring ripped back. It's all right there. It's all extra crap. So all that we need to do is the call for Y1 comes into number 2 on the lockout board, and then it comes out of number 3, runs through the pressure controls, through the freeze stat, and then comes back to the compressor contactor. So it's still using the lockout board. All the safeties are still intact. All we're doing is just disconnecting the economizer that was already disconnected. It was just disconnected over on the other end with all the wires, you know, in the way. So, all right, got a brand new blower assembly, all nice and pretty put together. We're gonna put the pulleys on. We're gonna replace this pulley because it's worn out. And we're just reassembling the unit. Wiring's all done for the pressure controls and everything, so just a little bit at a time. All right, we're all back together. We're ready to fire it up. A couple things. Number one, this unit needs some love, okay? Needs a new heat exchanger, needs a new blower motor bracket. We didn't get that. The electrical, you know, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in there. You know, I don't like these wire nuts and stuff, but we've got an aftermarket condenser fan motor. It's kind of okay, but I don't like all these funky wires and stuff. But it is what it is. I'm not going to change the motor just because. Now, if the motor had a short or something like that, I'd change the motor and go OEM, but I don't really have a reason to. So I hooked it all back up. Economizer's bypass, wiring's cleaned up just a little bit. We're kind of ready. Now, something we need to think about, this thing is so greasy and so dirty that we're gonna blow dirt down into the building. So we gotta go down there and slowly turn this on and kind of bump it and make sure we don't just fill the kitchen up with grease or with dirt and dust. You know, we don't want it to blow it onto their food and stuff. So we gotta be careful about that. And then we gotta figure out why it was frozen up. More than likely just because the air filters were completely plugged, but we'll go through the unit's operation. So we're allowed to run 5.2 amps. We're running 3.6, so we're under on current, but we left it the way that it was. We didn't change anything. So at this point, we're gonna jump it out and get cooling going and then test the condenser fan motor. The fact that it's an aftermarket motor, oftentimes people won't install the right size. So we're gonna test that to make sure that's good. And then we'll probe up on the unit and check all the charge and all that junk. So my unit kept going off on lockout. So to figure out where the problem was, I disconnected the lockout board and ran directly through the pressure controls. And what I'm getting is that I've got a call of 25 volts, okay? 25 volts, but I'm not getting 25 volts all the way to the contactor. I'm only getting 19 volts to the contactor. So we're losing some voltage somewhere. Something's going on. So what we're gonna do is isolate each pressure control and figure out which pressure control is the potential problem. So you've got low and high pressure here. Our problem is on the high pressure control because my low pressure control has 25 volts coming out of it, right? And then if we get onto the high pressure control, which is this guy, if I can get in there. There we go. That's the high pressure control. We're only getting 17, 18 volts running through the high pressure. So we have a failed high pressure control. Again, this is kind of weird because that would have nothing to do with it icing up. And the icing up, you would think that the freeze stat would have caught that. But I pulled the freeze stat out of the picture because I thought that was the problem when it isn't necessarily the problem. So we're gonna end up wiring this all back in, but we might have to put in a high pressure control. Because I don't know if it's potentially a weak transformer, which can happen, I didn't actually install the high pressure control. I have one right here. This is an aftermarket one, but it's an auto reset, so it'll be fine. And so I just hooked it up right here. And let's see if the compressor contactor pulls right in or if we still have the same voltage issue. So we're turning it on and it turned right on. So it looks like it's just a high pressure control failure, but just for giggles, just to make sure it's not a fluke, we're gonna wire back in the old one and make sure it still does the same thing. All right, the old one's wired back in and it's not doing anything. So yeah, it looks like it's a bad high pressure control is the problem. All right, so this is what we're doing. We've got a high pressure control. There's a Schrader below it. It's already on and tightened. There's a Schrader depressor in that, and there's a Schrader here. We're gonna go ahead and put it on that high side port right there, twist it on real quick, and just do a hot swap or whatever you wanna call it right there. So take a little bit of nylog and put it right here, just to make sure that the flare spins nice and smooth. Okay, there's already a teeny bit of nylog on there. Okay, just like that. And then actually gonna loosen it and tighten it right there because when I straighten it out, it's gonna tighten even more. So it's gonna be a little tricky. Let's see what we can do here. Should be good. Should be good, and then we'll just run the wires back over. We're not going to bother using the existing wires because we don't know if there's a problem with those too, so we'll just run these over to the connection on the other side. All right, so we wired back into the lockout board. So power comes from Y1 on this blue wire right here into the lockout board on number 2. Runs through the lockout board, then comes out of the lockout board into the freeze stat. Out of the freeze stat into the low pressure control. Out of the low pressure control into the high pressure control, and then out of the high pressure control into the compressor contactor. Now, if everything's correct, we should turn on when I flip this. There we go. We're back on and running, and everything is good. Now, a couple things I want to bring up. We're going to probe up on this guy, but I did end up moving the freeze stat because it wasn't turning off. Whether or not it's faulty, I don't know, but I moved it lower on the coil because it was all the way at the top where sometimes maybe the ice isn't at. So I moved it to the middle of the coil. But now we're gonna probe up on the unit and test the charge and see what's going on with it. This does not look horrible. Superheat's decent. Pressures are still kind of stabilizing out. I'm not hating the charge. I mean, it's pretty darn good. Temperature split's a little high. I would suspect that we've got some ductwork issues for sure. But I mean, that's pretty darn good. So the next thing we need to check is we are assuming that the filters are the reason that this thing iced up, but we don't know that to be 100% sure. I'll tell you too that the outdoor air damper was open pretty wide, and the outside air filters were also plugged. So it had plugged outside air filters and plugged return air filters. It wasn't letting any airflow into that coil. So it's a very good possibility it's just the plugged up filters that caused it to ice up, but we need to go down to the thermostat and make sure that it'll actually turn off from the thermostat, because it was running when we got up here. So we know that it was telling it to turn on, but we don't know that it'll tell it to turn off. All right, after it's been running even longer, we're looking a lot better. Now, some things I'm gonna tell you. I am mixing some outside air, so that is affecting my TD, okay? Now look at my temp split now because I opened up the outside air damper back to where it was. So you're mixing a little bit of that. Also, because I opened up the outside air damper, look at my temperature target versus what it is. And that's just because my air probe is getting a little more outside air than the actual building air. So airflow looks a little wonky, but superheat's on the low side. I still think we might have a slight airflow issue on this guy. So we're gonna go down and quickly investigate to see if the return air is plugged up or anything like that. And then also we're gonna test the thermostat, but I mean, it's looking pretty darn good. And it obviously the temperature split got a lot worse, a lot higher once I opened up the outside air damper. So we always mix a little bit of outside air on this unit, so. Look at those returns, man. Those things are dirty. I'm gonna have them clean those things a little bit. All right, we know it turns off. We just turned it off at the thermostat. We also set the time on the thermostat and made sure it was set right. It's set for 72 degrees. I'm not seeing anything else. I mean, obvious ductwork issues, but if I tried, these commercial customers don't ever want to fix the ductwork issues. It's just not gonna happen, so they just deal with it. Yeah, this guy's working. So we're gonna wrap this up. We're just gonna take a quick temperature split on this kitchen AC because they were complaining about that, but it's been running its heart away since we got here. So we changed the filters. Everything else looks good. We even checked the belt, so I think they're gonna be okay. One thing I will say, we probably need to get this guy running, the evaporative cooler. Bet you it needs all new pads, and yeah, filters are plugged. So that's a whole, they need a preventative maintenance here. We're not gonna spend all day doing that right now, but we're just gonna check TDs on this guy real quick, and that's it. We're wrapping it up.
All right, you can't just assume that it's the first thing you find, all right? In this situation, we walked up to the unit and it was frozen up, okay? And the filters were plugged. So, you know, but I didn't stop at the filters. Now, it ended up being the filters, but still, we look past the obvious and we thoroughly go through the system, okay? Now, I should say it wasn't just the filters, okay? The indoor blower assembly was plugged, the outside air filters were plugged, the inside air filters were plugged. So it was a little bit of everything, but still, I didn't just stop there, okay? And I tried to clean the blower assembly. I did my best, but it was just too caked on with the grease. And I mentioned something in the video too, and it's completely true. On these blower assemblies, when they get caked up with grease really, really bad, especially if they've been running like that for a very long time, they actually kind of self-balance themselves, okay? And something that I've noticed. And what'll happen is if you go and clean that thing and get all the grease off of it, all of a sudden the thing will be, even if it has the weight still on it, the little balancing weights, it'll just be way out of balance and start vibrating and shaking and everything, because it's been running with all that junk on it for so long that it's actually balanced out the wheel, however it does it, bending the aluminum or who knows, or steel or whatever it is. But so you got to be very careful and remember that if you're ever going to clean one of these that's really impacted like this one was, just understand that there's a very good possibility you're going to have to change that blower wheel. Now, on these smaller footprint carrier units, if you guys don't already know, they make a complete blower assembly that has everything you saw on it. It's already built and everything. You buy it. It's rather inexpensive, to be honest with you. The amount of time you would spend building that blower wheel, it's a lot cheaper just to buy a pre-built one. But once you get past the 5 and the 6 ton units, I haven't had luck getting a pre-built blower assembly, and they typically come in pieces. So you got to order the wheel, the shaft, the bearings, the spider brackets, all the, you know, the housing and everything. But on these smaller units, it's super easy. So when we get impacted blower wheels like this, I just go and pick up a new blower assembly. Now, I luck out that in this situation, the customer trusts my judgment, and I didn't even have to ask for any approvals or anything like that. I knew the unit needed to be fixed. I knew that the customer's not buying or replacing units. They're just going to town. They just tell us just to fix it, so we just knocked it out, okay? But like I said, we didn't just stop at the dirty filters. We didn't just stop at the dirty blower. We didn't just stop at the dirty condenser. We thoroughly went through everything. Now, we also found that there was an issue with the high pressure control. Now, that was an interesting intermittent issue because the unit was iced up and running when we got there. But when I turned it back on, all of a sudden the high pressure control was problematic, okay? Sometimes that stuff happens, okay? It just does. So that's why it's so important when you come out to these units that you thoroughly go through them. In the situation of a new customer and maybe I quoted this repair, that would have sucked because the high pressure control probably wouldn't have been part of my quote, you know? So you have to make sure that your customers understand. So in a situation like this, what I would do if I had to quote this is I would go to the customer and I would say, hey, the unit is so dirty that I can't troubleshoot anything until I clean the unit. Plain and simple. So then we clean it. I would quote for that. And then we come back and we diagnose. And then I would quote for that and then do the repair. Okay. So I'm never going to go in there and just say, oh yeah, it's dirty. I'll clean it and it'll be working perfect and you'll be good to go, because you never know what you're going to run into. Okay. Issues, it just becomes a pain in the butt. And, sometimes when you're cleaning stuff, stuff breaks. It happens. When these units are so neglected in this way, it's inevitable that things are going to happen and things are going to come up. So it's so important that you have a good relationship with your customer. There's a good communication there. They have trust in you. You have faith that they're going to pay their bills and all that stuff, because it just helps everything to go that much smoother. Okay. So on the high pressure control, diagnosing that, the first thing that I thought when I saw there was some sort of an intermittent issue was I thought the freeze stat was the problem. Okay. And so I simply eliminated that from the circuit and continued my troubleshooting. Using my meter, not just using a hot stick or a voltage detector. I'm actually checking voltage, because if I had a hot stick or something like that, or a voltage detector, one of those little pens or whatever, it would have said I had the voltage and I wouldn't have seen it. So you have to measure it and be able to see that voltage, okay? And I just went through the sequence of operation on the unit in troubleshooting the pressure controls. I understand how these work, so it was rather easy for me to work my way through the troubleshooting process. I eliminated the freeze stat, had the high and the low pressure, measured voltage in, measured voltage out of the low pressure, it was good, measured voltage into the high pressure, it was good. And I didn't have proper voltage. I was losing. I had a voltage drop across the high pressure control. So instead of recovering the charge and sweating in a new high pressure control, I was able to use a swivel tee, okay, and just tighten it down. If you do it correctly the way that I did, you do everything else, you build it, and then you put the pressure control on there. Whenever I install pressure controls, the peanut style encapsulated ones like this, they have a Schrader depressor in them, so I always put Schraders in them. Now, if you're using like an adjustable universal pressure control, like a Johnson Control P70 LB1C, I think is a dual pressure, they do not have Schrader depressors on them, so you can't put Schraders in those ports. So just keep that in mind, okay? So we went ahead and replaced the pressure control. The system was operational. It will, make its way through the summer again. This is a kitchen office AC, so they'll never use heat in here, but it's important to know, for safety reasons, I permanently disconnected the heating. I don't want any possibility of that heat accidentally turning on. With all that buildup and that grease on that heat exchanger, we don't want that thing turning on, because that's a serious fire hazard, okay? Again, big picture stuff, guys. You don't just go in there with a one-track mind and say it's iced up and, move on. You look at everything. I treat it like it's the first time I've been to this location. I treat this customer like they're my parents. I try to take care of them, be honest and upfront, because my hope is that I continue to work with this customer for years and years and years to come, okay? It's not worth it for me to make a quick buck today so that way I don't get to work for them tomorrow, okay? So I'm always trying to be open and honest, and of course I need to make a profit, but I'm trying not to gouge my customers. I never want to be not truthful to them. I never want to be shady. I try to be fair, open, and honest with them at all times. I was having a discussion with my dad today, and we were talking as I was driving home from work, and I was just telling him, I treat every service call like another technician is going to walk up behind me and start talking crap. So that's a motivation for me, because I don't want anybody to talk crap on my work, right? So every time I do something, I always have that in the back of my head. I don't want someone to come up behind me and have ammunition to talk down on me or talk bad about my service work or anything like that. Now, I'm not perfect, and of course I make mistakes, but I always treat every job like that, okay? Don't give other service technicians any fuel to add to the fire. Don't give them an excuse to talk crap on you. Don't do shady work. Don't leave stuff uncovered. You know, that kind of stuff. Just try to treat it like someone's going to come behind you and audit your work every single time you do something. It'll just keep you on your toes and make sure you're doing everything properly. Hey, I really appreciate you guys making it to the end of this video. If you haven't already, check out my website, hvacrvideos.com. We got hats and beanies as we're coming. I know we're still in the midst of summer, but we are coming into the fall time. People start thinking about that, you know, in the next month and a half or so. So we've got the zip-up hoodie sweatshirts. We have beanies on the website. Check it out if you want to help to support the channel. A couple other the different ways to support the channel. The easiest way is simply watch the videos from beginning to end without skipping through anything. That's the easiest way. You can also go to Patreon. You can support the channel via Patreon. That's where you make a monthly contribution. You can support the channel via YouTube channel memberships. It's just like Patreon. You make a monthly contribution through PayPal. And there's another cool way to support the channel is if you go to TrueTechTools.com. If you're considering purchasing any tools, check out the website, TrueTechTools.com. See if you like their pricing. See if you like what they have. And I actually have a discount code, big picture, one word. It'll save you at this day and time. It may change in a future date, okay? But at this day and time, it is July 28th of 2021. You'll get an 8% discount on your order using my offer code, big picture, one word. And if you guys know what you're going to purchase, shoot me over an email and I can generate an affiliate link that gets me a little bit more of a commission and you still get to save the 8%. Okay, all you got to do is let me know what you want and I generate a link and then you click that link and then put in the offer code and you still get a discount. So there's links in the show notes of this video to all the different ways to support the channel if you're so interested in doing so. And yeah, guys, that is it. Again, I really, really appreciate you all. You guys are amazing. And we will catch you on the next one, okay?